I said this a couple of weeks ago. We're headed down to ACC football kickoff in Charlotte, and I was going to miss my friend Chip Patterson because they were going big time to the Big Ten in Indianapolis. I watched what I could between our own interviews, but they were on all day long, it seemed, with all sorts of coaches. They had a big setup on the field at Lucas Oil Stadium, and Chip Patterson joins us. Cover 3 podcast, CBSSports.com. You had the whole the setup right there, the Cover 3 logo. You looked very good. I didn't see very many situations where all 4 of you guys were on set together, where you just didn't have enough chairs. What was the deal?
Yeah, just 4 microphones, just 4 chairs. So somebody had to cycle out, whether it was Penn State's James Franklin, USC's Lincoln Riley, whether it was Sharon Moore from Michigan. Yeah. We had to keep moving one person on, one person out just to keep it smooth. But, man, I got there, which was an adventure. I don't know if you heard about travel flights during the last week or so, but right? It was.
Did you get blue screened?
I got delayed, canceled, rebooked, switched airlines, ran through Atlanta's airport, begged a nice man with braids to just let me walk onto an airplane. I just anything that I could do to be able to get my body to where I needed to be. I will forever be indebted to the kind gate agent in the T terminal in Atlanta. Nice. I'll come find you with a gift if I get to the national championship game in January.
All right, I'm glad. I'm glad you made it. So I'm just going to throw this open, broad brush it for me, because obviously you were in Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. I thought your preview for what was going to happen at the ACC Media Days was very accurate, even if it didn't play out that way after day one. But just broad brush, what is your takeaway from essentially the month of talking season?
Shoo. Everyone has their corner, right, and everybody has their talking points, and I am already exhausted by what I find to be the most unhelpful discussion, which is how many teams do each conference get in the college football playoff? I have said with you for years that the national championship is not college football. That college football is great because of everything that's happening on a week-in, week-out basis, from the roller coaster that you get shooting out of the gate in Labor Day. In October, you start to figure everybody out, and it sets all the pieces in motion for what is the race to the end of the year in November. So when I hear Matt Rule getting up there and saying, well, I think we should have 4 teams in the college football playoff every single year. When I hear, an SEC network analyst talking about, well, we should have 5 teams. And then even coming from the ACC as well, you're trying to do the math of like, okay, so we know it's Clemson and Florida State. Now, who can be the third? I just think it is not a helpful conversation because we have no idea what that picture is going to look like in the race for the at-large bids. We have no idea what it's going to look like going into conference championship Saturday, where there could be an 8-4 Big 12 team that is live as a bid thief to be able to change the math on every single thing that you expect. So to me, the thing that I am already exhausted by is what I find to be a meaningless and unhelpful conversation when it comes to previewing the college football season, because there are better stories and there are more interesting topics than trying to do a how many teams is this conference going to get in the playoff.
Chip Patterson is joining us here. Normally we do this on Wednesdays, but today we're doing it on a Tuesday because why not? All right, so first of all, could not agree more. First of all, in the ACC, I think it's an assumption that it's Florida State and Clemson, given the fact that the schedules are so vastly different. For all we know, we could be sitting here at the end of the year. It could be NC State and SMU. I'm not saying it's going to be that way, but I think there's a lot of teams that with one result in their favor could be in that mix, or one result not in their favor fall out. But I want to set that aside for a second, because something that Matt Rule said is something kind of builds on something that I heard throughout the last couple of weeks. That we were talking, like, I get that financially the SEC and the Big Ten are in a different stratosphere. I get it.
Correct.
Competitively, nothing could be further from the truth. The SEC, yes, football-wise, throw other sports in there. Basketball, baseball, right? Women's basketball. I get that. But where is the Big Ten compared to the ACC in a competitive manner? I'm not talking about whether or not this year the Big Ten will have more teams in the playoff or will have better teams in the ACC. They may very well. But based on the last, 20 years, that's an unfair fight. But we're shaping this as though the Big Ten, competitively speaking, is on par with the SEC. And that's false.
Well, it depends on Oregon and USC, because you're right. I mean, if we're talking about the old Big Ten, which is, you've got Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, which are programs that fundraise, spend, and recruit at a level that is at the top of the country. That they, not always right there with an Alabama or a Georgia. Ohio State's the only one that can say that. But certainly with the standard of success that James Franklin has had at Penn State,
right.
With Michigan winning the national championship last year, the Big Ten had more teams that recruit, spend, and treat like they are competing for the national championship than anybody but the SEC. So your view of Oregon and USC is a big part of that, and that's why there's so much responsibility. Because I think Oregon has the most talented roster that the Ducks have ever had, ever, in their entire program's history.
Right.
And I think that USC, while they wildly disappointed with a 7-5 season, wasting Caleb Williams last year, they are a Caleb Williams hamstring away from being in the college football playoff the year prior.
Right.
And that would be the Trojans' first ever playoff appearance. If you believe that Lincoln Riley can get USC, back up into that top tier, I mean, they are recruiting at a USC appropriate level once again under Lincoln Riley. If you think that that's the case, well, then you've got 5 programs that are competing at that top level, which is somewhat similar to the SEC. Now, what the SEC does not have that I think the Big Ten has is a very steep drop down after that top level of programs that are spending, recruiting, and treating their football program as if they are trying to be one of the best in the country. In the SEC, it is more stair steps. There are levels to this. We could talk about how Ole Miss has never done it, but Ole Miss wanting to do it is more than what you can say for some of the programs that are in the middle of the pack of the Big Ten. And I think that especially when you bring the ACC into this, the ACC does not have programs beyond that very top tier that are recruiting, fundraising, spending at a level of those top dogs. But they, like the SEC, have a little bit more of a stair steps, where it is not just such a steep drop off to the next tier, where you can look at Louisville, NC State, Virginia Tech, and now SMU and say, okay, this is the group that right now, based on their personnel and the cycles, one of them could get up and nip them. And that's healthy competitiveness that I think frustrates ACC fans, where they say, why are we making such a big deal out of a conference where there is such a big drop off from the top to the bottom, as though Penn State can't go through and beat everybody by double digits, but lose to Ohio State, Michigan, and be 10-2. I think that there's a really decent conversation there, but the leagues have become so bloated that you can just grab whatever factoid you want and it ends up being true.
Well, you and I have talked about this so many times. You know how I feel about Iowa and Wisconsin and some of those other teams who play on the other side that don't ever get challenged, and they fatten up. Well, we don't have to. I don't want to belabor the point, but for the last however many years, there's really been 3 schools in that league that have been nationally relevant, and some of the other schools have good records that may change with Oregon, Southern Cal, Washington. Real quick before I get to what you wrote going into the ACC and then what happened, everything cool with Deshaun Foster and UCLA? That was super awkward. My first takeaway from that was that it was an act and that he was clearly not interested in being in the Big Ten being a UCLA guy to his core, that he was not thrilled with the new conference affiliation, but it does seem after the fact that he was just uncomfortable in that setting. What was your reaction to that?
Number one, he joined us and was great.
Right.
He
I
was
saw that.
He was incredibly direct. He gave like really good answers, thoughtful answers, threw Chip Kelly under the bus, which who doesn't love that? Like I saw that and the clip, like it wasn't connecting. And then you go over to his media scrum and he's like, I haven't seen the clip yet. I'm sure people will laugh at it. He was amazingly self-aware, considering the way that it was being treated virally.
We're from Los Angeles. We're from LA.
I want to bring up two things. Number one, first edition of Body Clock. Okay. It was the very first interview. It was the very first podium appearance of the day. He had not been at the event yet. Okay. He steps up there. It is 8 a.m. local time. He hasn't watched anybody else or any other coaches step to the mic. He hasn't watched any of the other opening statements and the rhythms of a media day. I mean, Deshaun Foster's could you imagine how different media days? I mean, actually, I'm not going to. This is mean, Adam, but you can imagine how different media days are from when Deshaun Foster was a player and potentially a representative to where they are now. So if I am to, lay blame, and I do feel bad doing this, I've got to put it on like the staff.
Sure.
For not saying, hey, coach, like this is what it's going to look like. Maybe even like, hey, this is what some of the other opening statements have looked like so far. Because, I mean, other coaches get up there, they've got it prepared, they introduce all the players that they've brought, they talk about all their new hires, and then they open it up for questions. And it appeared as though he was not prepared to make an opening statement. So, number one, it was the very first one of the day. He hadn't seen anybody else. Number two, it looked like he hadn't even seen an opening statement before. And then in the middle of a stadium that was huge, right? And a ton of media gathered there, froze up just a little bit. But when he sat on our set, he was incredibly personable. And again, what were some of the challenges that you had when you took over this program? He said, well, we had to fix our NIL. I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, we had to let people in. They're not going to give if they don't feel a part of it.
Right.
And if we have our walls up and keep everybody locked out, no one's going to give to us. And I was like, okay, so you just told us that Chip Kelly was just totally hurting his own program by refusing to let anybody come share in the success.
Yeah. Well, does that surprise anybody? Knowing what we know about Chip Kelly. All right, let me move to what happened in Charlotte. Now, I was not there for day one of ACC Media Day. We were still, I was still dealing with other things. We got there for Wednesday, but I certainly followed it, and I watched Jim Phillips. Now, you wrote, and I read this, before we even got to Charlotte. You wrote that all of the storylines are going to be blocked by the legal maneuverings of Florida State and Clemson. And I'm not sure that actually happened. Day one was Jim Phillips, and that came up. But once Jim Phillips was done, and we talked about all of that, and we'll get to that in a second, it really was about the football. And whether I have to give somebody credit for that or not, I just do think that we did get to all of the other things. Let me go back to Jim Phillips. I love Jim. As a human being, he's one of the finest people I have met in intercollegiate athletics, certainly among the people who have his responsibilities. And I've often thought that in this day and age of what college sports is, that it's an ill fit among conference commissioners because none of these people are commissioners as much as they are corporate sharks. And that's not who Jim Phillips is. Brett Yormark is a corporate shark. Tony Petitti is a corporate shark. Greg Sankey, maybe less so in his position, doesn't necessarily have to be, but he's not looking out for the greater good. He's looking out for his constituents only. I think Jim Phillips, unfortunately, walks a fine line between trying to do the best he can for the league, but also carrying around this idealism of what college athletics in his mind should be, and he wrestles with it. But I thought he did a very good job of presenting the ACC's case against Clemson and Florida State. He didn't shy away from the confrontation, at least as much as you can have a confrontation when you are simply delivering your own remarks. I thought he did as good a job as he could have possibly done. Doesn't necessarily change anything about public perception, about whether people think the league is doomed, or if Florida State's leaving, or if Clemson's also leaving. I just thought he did a really good job of shaping the ACC's narrative. I don't know how much you got a chance to catch it, but I was impressed with what Jim did.
Yeah, a couple things that stood out to me. Number one, this has already been discussed a lot, but taking it head on and being extremely passionate about the topic.
Right.
We are going to fight as long as it takes is a message. And I think it pairs with ESPN's Pete Thamel reporting on the morning of that day, there's not going to be any notification before August 15th. I mean, I haven't seen the Twitter realignment trolls calm down so quickly. Everybody, where's the ACC doomsday clock people out there? The did the ACC die today website? I realize that's a parody one.
That's a good one. I love it.
That's good. Yeah, I know. But it was almost as if everyone kept rushing to the media days and then rushing to that August 15th deadline. And it's that 1-2 punch of Pete's report that no one is expecting any pre-August 15th notification. And then Jim saying we're going to fight it as long as it takes. It's like everybody got to calm down. And one thing I wrote in the piece is that I am excited about media days turning the page from the legal battles, taking the attention from the courtroom to the field, because what we have is ACC football at its best. And ACC football is at its best when Clemson and Florida State are competing for championships against each other. Those are the two programs that are doing it different than everyone else in the league.
Right.
And when they both have the right coaches and everything rolling in the right direction, and they are going back and forth, it makes the rest of ACC football all that raises the status of everybody else. And so I am, very excited for the fact that the coming out of ACC media days, it is about the football, and it is about those two teams leading the way, the intrigue of a rock star portal built Mario Cristobal team. And, and all these other pieces, the fact that when I did my ACC win totals back in June, I had 5 teams finish with a 7-1 record.
Yeah.
That we have that kind of scenario is very, very exciting and very intriguing. So I'm very comfortable with where we have landed, in that we can calm down on anything imminent, and that we can look ahead to what should be a very fun season of football in the Atlantic Coast Conference.
Yeah, you talk about you had 5 teams finishing 7-1. I think there are 7 teams who could either be good enough or have the schedule conducive to have any number of combinations wind up in Charlotte. I expect Florida State will end up in Charlotte, and even if it's not DJ Uiagalelei at quarterback doing it, right? I'm not sure he's all that great, but I think the rest of that team is pretty doggone good. But Miami, if they can overcome the coaching, I think Virginia Tech's going to be good. SMU could be. I mean, there's a lot of really good teams. Obviously, there's a lot of expectations on NC State. So let's close on the Wolfpack, just to put it in football sense. It's fair to have expectations for them, right?
Well, without a doubt. I mean, this is the standard of consistency that we've seen, over the last several years, says that small step should be there. You had a you had half of a quarterback last year and still wound up with one of the best conference records.
Yeah.
You know, you looked like you were done in the middle of the season, and then they come roaring back. The fabric and the DNA of this program is such that when you do add in a Noah Rogers from Ohio State, when you add in a Jordan Waters from Duke, when you bring in, of course, Grayson McCall from Coastal Carolina, you convince guys like Davin Vann and Aiden White to not go pro, not hit the portal. It's a season of purpose, and that purpose is to take the next step. The schedule is among the 5 or 6 most manageable schedules in the entire ACC. You know, you play Clemson and you play Tennessee, and then you play 10 teams that you should probably be favored to beat. So for a program that has had an elusive 10-win mark, here you go. Go get it.
I agree. I mean, the trip to Cal is not going to be easy because you're going to have to stop one of the best running backs in the country. The Carolina game also will not be easy. You also have to stop one of the best running backs in the country there, in Amari and Hampton. But look, it's all sitting right there. I think their defense will be fine because Tony Gibson's still in charge, and Dave Doran still will have all of his fingerprints all over it. I think, and I said this to Dave Doran there. I think their program. I keep saying this. It's not about teams, although I think this team is good. The program. I mean. And we talked a lot about, how he has changed in the development of certain aspects of his program over a dozen years. This is year 12. It's Dabo and Dave. And then it's Dave Clawson, by the way. It is remarkable that it's 12 years, year 12 for Dave Doran at NC State.
So from, I believe, and I'm sure I'll get fact-checked this, but I believe from 2010 to 2017, in that gap, NC State did not make a single appearance in the AP Top 25 poll. And when you look at NC State's national position, you feel like they're just permanently 22nd. And in a sense, yeah. I could understand how you'd be insulted by that, but look where you were. And look where you are right now. I believe they've been inside the top 25 almost every single season since 2017. So he has changed it. He has not just changed it internally. He's changed it externally. The perception of NC State football is wildly different than where it was when he first took the job.
Being a perennial top 25 team is a good thing. Yes. It's not even if you're 22nd, which means that there are plenty of days when you're much higher than that.
Right.
Because you're not always inside of it. Chip Patterson, I appreciate your time. Welcome back from Indianapolis. Did you get to Elmo's or no?
No Elmo's, but it was the first time that all 4 Cover 3 hosts have been together in person. So we had 2 exquisite dinners together that was special to be able to spend that time.
Very nice. Well, we'll talk about the dinners another time. I'll see you very soon, my friend.
Sounds good. Y'all be well.
Chip Patterson here on The Adam Gold Show.